But we had an opportunity at the Carolina Crown this year to investigate some new product options at Vic Firth. There's some things that I wanted to achieve. One of them is creating a big, large, natural sound out of the keys without having a really hard attack and without having it be really brittle sounding. So I wanted to get something that was a little bit heavier, but also had a very nice, warm sound, but that could project to the top of any stadium. With the marimba mallets, we achieved that with adding a little bit of weight compared to a lot of the normal mallets, but also using a thicker rod for the mallet, and that ended up giving it a little bit more balance. For the vibraphone mallets, we experimented with doing some yarn vibraphone mallets, which are something there weren't really a lot of out there, especially in the marching mallet lines. So I wanted to experiment with that, having that weight in there and giving a little bit of a different tone to the vibes. For my personal preference, I like it so that you hear the actual instruments along with the amplification. I don't want to hear all of the mallet sound coming out of the speakers, because I think it's just a little bit artificial, and especially when you combine that in a drum corps field or a marching band, or even indoor drum line where you're getting natural sound from all the rest of the instruments. We want to make sure that I still achieve some natural sound from the front ensemble as well. So my goal is to have a balanced and blended sound with the amplification along with the actual instruments, so it sounds like maybe instead of 4 marimbas, it sounds like we have 6 that are competing to get upstairs, but it's not just 2 speakers creating all the sound. A lot of people achieve clarity of sound from the front ensemble by using a harder mallet, and that's always going to cut through the texture, but sometimes it can be a little bit brittle, and sometimes it ends up being just all attack sound. So using some extra weight with the mallet, we wanted to achieve a sound where you got more vibrations and you actually got the bar to resonate a little bit more, and to have the actual sound of the instrument compete more with the other instruments that are out there rather than just the attack. So you can hear if it's fast runs or if it's even in a ballad setting, that the actual tone of the instrument is what you're hearing more so than just the attack. And you'll get both things still. Obviously, it's just a matter of making sure that it has a little bit more presence. Each mallet was designed specifically to fit within a range of sounds that you would want in an ensemble. So like some of the softer mallets, my experience with a lot of softer mallets is you either get a lot of tone or you kind of get nothing at all. And so I wanted to create something that still had a clear fundamental articulation to it, but was still soft and still sounded good on the low end of the marimba. I think some of the strength of this set too is that you have a little bit more range in the instrument with the mallet, so that you can make it sound good on the low end and the high end, and then you can mix and match out to make things blend a little bit better. The core of the marimba mallets is designed to have more weight than most of the normal mallets would have, and there are 3 different ones. The 230, which is the one designed for the lowest part of the marimba. It still has a lot of weight to it, but there's also a shape that is a little bit, it's not as round, it kind of is a little bit more thinner top to bottom. Just allows for a little bit more articulation on that part of the board, so that you hear the same combination of sound that you would hear with the 231 or the 232. The middle mallet, the 231, I think has worked really well. It sounds good in pretty much all areas of the marimba, whereas a lot of middle mallets, sometimes they lose a little bit of tone at the top, or you lose a little bit, or it gets a little clanky at the bottom, and I think that one really works the whole range. And then the 232, I think, gets a lot of sound, a lot of articulation, but it never really gets to the high brittle end where it sounds more like a xylophone. You still get a lot of marimba tone out of the mallet, and that's been the goal with the marimba mallets. The vibraphone mallets are very unique because we used a yarn wrap rather than a cord wrap, which is kind of unique to the marching idiom specifically. I wanted to create a warmer tone out of the vibraphones, and I thought that was the most unique way to kind of achieve that. The 233, which is the lowest of the vibe mallets, has a little bit more weight to it. It gets a really, really warm and rich tone out of the instrument. The 234, my goal with that was, again, to make it fit the entire instrument, to make sure that you could play it at the high end, you could play it at the low end, and you get clear, articulate sounds. For me, in my past, the middle vibe range has always been the most difficult to achieve and find that right mallet where you have a good weight to it, you get a lot of tone, but you also get somewhat of an articulation without it being too much. So my goal was to kind of combine a lot of different sounds that I'd heard and the sounds that I'd used in the past and make sure that everything I wanted was in that mallet. The 235s, they're not, as far as the Vic Firth mallet series goes, they're definitely not the hardest mallet that you can use, but it's one where, especially in a more delicate setting, you can get articulation and a lot of sound, and it blends really well with the marimba voice all the time. For me, it was really important that the mallet sounded great in the press box. So we got a lot of the mallets over the summer, and I did a lot of my decisions based on, we were actually at Normal, Illinois at the BOA Summer Symposium, and I sat in the top row of the stands and I just had them try different prototypes, see how it sounded with the drum corps, see how it sounded as a front ensemble, see what worked well with the battery and what didn't. And through that process we were able to get the right combination of sounds that I wanted, but also that would work in the big picture. I wanted to make sure that the front ensemble was as present as the brass and as present as the battery section, without having an unfavorable sound to any of the instruments. I'm very excited about how the product turned out. I think it's very unique, and it also offers a lot of quality, and I'm very proud of how it turned out. So you know, if you get a chance, check out Carolina Crown, check out the mallet line, and I think you'll really like it and be excited about the different options it offers.